the brightness and the luminescence, the glory of the moment going away, and it's just Jesus among them. But what's lingering in the air is listen to him. I've said this before, but you can break up human beings into two categories. People who listen and people who wait to talk. And increasingly in our culture, and I am guilty of this too, out of the fullness of our fear about not being heard and not being understood, we are becoming a people who do no listening and who only shut up long enough to be courteous in waiting to talk. That what matters to us is not hearing, but speaking. Lent, as it comes to us each year, is about trying to change that a little bit. Letting our fears be put aside for a moment, becoming quiet in our hearts and in our minds, and certainly quiet, taking care of our lips and shutting them up for a minute, and listening, tuning our hearts in to the heavenly broadcast, and being quiet for a moment to hear from God. God is always speaking. God doesn't just show up and start and stop talking to us. God is always about the business of sharing his heart with us. God is always about the business of disclosing himself. God is always about the business of offering himself to us in love. And the only difference between hearing from God and not hearing from God is whether we are listening. And for most of us, the fear gets in the way. The urge to speak because we're afraid that we're not going to be heard and not going to be understood crowds out the first duty. And the way this works out, and I was experiencing this just the other day, wondering about my prayer life. And I spend a lot of time thinking about whether I'm the man of prayer that I really ought to be. And in just a moment of frustration, I was like, God, how many times do I have to tell you the kinds of things that I desire? I mean, how many times do you need to hear that I want the people of Trinity in the Fields to experience your blessing and your goodness and your greatness among them? How many times do you need to hear that I want Lily and Tracy and Abigail to be well taken care of for? How do you not know that I want to do well teaching, writing? How many times do I actually need to tell you these things? Certainly they're not a mystery to you, are they, God? And then this is about the time that I start to look at this week's readings. And all of a sudden it comes like a stopper on my mouth that says, you know what? God doesn't need you to pray so that he can know what's going on in your heart. God doesn't need you to pray so that, God can get some kind of clue as to what you really desire in life. Don't you know, Mr. Theologian, that God knows you better than you know yourself? The reason why you need to pray is not so that God can know you better, but so that you can know God better, so that you can quiet your voice a little bit and become open to the voice of your Father speaking to you, because the most important voice in the world is not yours in prayer. It's God's. The most important thing in the world is not God getting with the program to meet the needs that you think you have, but you're being tuned in to get on the same page as God is on, so that you can do what God is blessing. Brother, sister, this is the great gift of the Lenten season that's coming to us. A time where we can set aside our fears, to know that God not only cares about us, but that he understands us perfectly. So we can set that aside. And then dealing with the most important thing going on. And it's this admonition that comes to the disciples in the Transfiguration. Knowing that Jesus is God's Son, and that our first duty and the most important thing that we can do in light of that is to open our ears, to open our eyes, to open our hearts, and listen to him. Amen.